It was a cool autumn day, and Charlie was riding his bike to his friend Alfie's house when he saw a moving van pull up in front of the purple mansion on the hill. A tall, wiry woman climbed out of the driver's seat. She had bright orange hair with curls that seemed to be blowing in the breeze, even though the air was perfectly still. Her black skirts billowed and swirled around her boots. She wore a white t-shirt emblazoned with a logo in blood red and forest green. It read, Hazel's Herbarium. The woman opened the back door of the van, and from where Charlie had stopped, he could see that there were no boxes inside, only plants. In fact, it looked like an entire garden had been uprooted, potted, and driven to Cypress Creek. "Hey, you, give me a hand with this stuff, and I'll give you $5, the woman called down to Charlie. Against his better judgment, Charlie walked his bike up the hill for a better look. "What is all that?" he asked. "An enchanted forest," the woman replied matter-of-factly. "What?" Charlie took a step back. It was an odd thing for an adult to say. She was probably joking, but it did look like the van could hold a few gnomes and a wood sprite or two. The lady's laugh took him by surprise. It was high-pitched and unpleasant, more of a cackle than a chuckle. "Don't you know when someone's pulling your leg? It's just a bunch of plants. I'm opening a shop downtown." Charlie and his friends had wondered about the shop opening up next to the ice cream parlor. They'd seen workmen painting the interior multiple shades of green. His friend Paige thought it might be a place to buy seeds and unusual vegetables. Rocco was hoping it would be a reptile emporium. "So it's going to be a plant store?" "More like a magic shop," the woman replied, and Charlie perked up. Then she pointed at her shirt. "It's going to be called Hazel's Herbarium. I'm an herbalist. That means I use plants to treat sick people." For a moment, Charlie felt a surge of hope. Then his heart fell when he remembered that his mom was long gone. He looked back up to find the strange woman studying his face. "What's your name?" The way she asked made Charlie wonder if she already knew. He glanced down at his bike. His gut was telling him it was time to leave. This woman was not normal, at least not the kind of normal he'd ever met. But he laid down his bicycle and held out a hand. Charlie Laird," he'd said. The woman took his hand, but she didn't shake. Instead, she held it between her palms as if it were a little creature she'd been clever enough to capture. "Charlie Laird," the woman repeated, her lips stretching into a toothy smile. "I'm Charlotte DeChant. I've been looking forward to meeting you." A chill ran down Charlie's spine, and he pulled his hand away. "Why?" he asked a little too quickly. How could she have been looking forward to meeting him? She shouldn't have even known he existed. "Well, if I'm not mistaken, you must be related to Veronica Laird," Charlie continued. It felt like the woman had shoved a hand into his chest, grabbed his heart, and squeezed. "She's my mom." "I knew her once, a long time ago," Charlotte said. "I was sorry to hear that she passed away." "It's okay," Charlie said, though it wasn't, and it never would be. He wished the lady would change the subject. He could already feel his cheeks burning, and just like that, it seemed as if Charlie's wish had been granted. Charlotte raised her eyebrows and nodded at the moving van. "So what do you say? You want to earn a few bucks?" I don't know," Charlie hesitated. He'd always been warned not to talk to strangers, and this woman with her blazing orange hair and portable jungle was nothing if not extremely strange. Charlie looked up at the house behind her, his eyes drawn as always to the tower. The lady was weird, but he hadn't been this close to the mansion in years, and everything he'd always dreamed about was on the other side of that front door. It would be torture to simply walk away. "Then maybe I should sweeten the offer," Charlotte said with a sly grin. $5, and I throw in a tour of the house." It was like she'd read his mind. Charlie's curiosity was an itch he was desperate to scratch. Was the house as ugly inside as it was on the outside? Why did the tower glow at night? And who was the person he'd seen standing at the window? 1,000 questions bounced around in his brain. "What's in the tower?" Charlie asked eagerly. Charlotte cackled again. And Charlie had to resist the urge to stick his finger in his ears. "Things that go bump in the night." Charlie should have turned away as soon as he heard that. He should have hopped on his bike and hightailed it to Alfie's house and never looked back. He'd never had such a bad case of the heebie-jeebies before, but Charlie didn't leave. He couldn't. He didn't know if it was curiosity or some kind of magic that pulled him inside, but he moved the woman's plants to the porch. He accepted $5 for his trouble, and then he followed Charlotte inside for his tour. An overfed tabby cat met Charlie at the door. It took one look at him, hunched its back, and hissed. Charlie stepped over the orange beast and caught up to Charlotte just as she was pointing out the mansion's parlor and library. The heavy old sofas and sagging armchairs in both rooms were upholstered in lilac, magenta, and mauve. Even the shelves in the library were painted the color of ripe eggplant. "Wow, your place is really grape." The word slid out of Charlie's mouth before he could stop it. The closer he got to the tower, the more jittery he felt. "Great! I meant great. Your place is really great." "Good one," Charlotte replied, cracking a grin. "The crazy furniture came with the house, but I'll probably have everything painted or covered. I've had my fill of purple when I was a kid." She reached a wide wooden staircase that twisted up toward the top of the house and started to climb. Charlie found himself stalled on the first step, his eyes fixed on a portrait that stared down at him from the landing. It showed a young man dressed in an old-fashioned jacket and a high white neckerchief. He looked rich, and he would have been handsome if not for this hollow expression in his eyes. Who was he? Charlie asked his guide. He'd seen circles that dark around his own mother's eyes, and he suspected the man in the portrait had been sick. Charlotte paused on the stairs. When she turned to face Charlie, she seemed to study him for a moment as if he were a scientific specimen. "That's one of my great-great-grandfathers. His name was Silas DeChand," she said. "He's the man who built this place." Charlie shivered. He had been searching for Silas for years. The lady who ran the Cypress Creek Library had sworn there were no paintings or photos of the town's mysterious founder, and yet here he was, and he'd been here all along. "What was wrong with him?" Charlie half whispered, gripping the banister. He was feeling a bit wobbly, like his knees had gone soft and the ground was made of jello. Was Silas sick? "Let's just say he was stuck in a very dark place," Charlie replied. "But he found his way out. My grandma told me Silas had the portrait painted to remind him that there are places some people go where they aren't meant to stay." "Like where?" Charlie asked. "Like Las Vegas," Charlotte said with a wink. Then she turned her back to him and began climbing the stairs again. "Are you coming?"